The CEO stood in my doorway at midnight, trembling and desperate, but it wasn't money or power she needed. It was an escape from a life that was slowly destroying her. When Victoria Langford appeared at Daniel Carter's apartment that autumn night, she shattered the careful distance between their worlds. She was Seattle's most powerful tech executive. He was a struggling single father doing contract repairs. Their paths should never have crossed like this. At midnight, with her mascara smudged and her perfectly constructed life crumbling around her. If you want to see how an unexpected midnight visitor changed everything, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving Seattle's streets slick and gleaming under the amber glow of streetlights. Daniel Carter sat at his small kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork that seemed to multiply no matter how many invoices he filed or receipts he organized. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on the interstate. He rubbed his eyes, glancing at the clock on the microwave. 12:17 a.m. Another late night, another stack of bills that demanded attention he barely had the energy to give. Being a freelance tech repair specialist meant freedom, sure, but it also meant uncertainty. Feast or famine. This month had been somewhere uncomfortably in between. Down the hall, his 6-year-old daughter Emma slept peacefully, her nightlight casting soft pink shadows across her bedroom walls. Daniel could picture her now, curled up with the stuffed elephant she'd named Professor Trunk, her dark hair spread across the pillow like silk. She was the reason he pushed through these endless nights. The reason he'd fought so hard during the divorce, negotiating custody arrangements while his ex-wife's lawyer treated him like he was asking for something he didn't deserve. He'd won joint custody, but Sarah had moved to Portland 6 months ago for a better opportunity. Now Emma lived with him most of the time, and Daniel had restructured his entire life around school pickups, bedtime routines, and making sure his daughter never felt like her world had fallen apart just because her parents couldn't make it work. Daniel stretched, his back protesting the hours spent hunched over paperwork. He was 32 but felt older on nights like this. He stood, planning to make one more cup of coffee before giving up and going to bed, when he heard it. A creak. Not the settling house kind of creak. The someone is opening your front door kind of creak. Daniel's entire body went rigid. He'd locked that door. He always locked that door. Triple-checked it every night because he had a daughter sleeping down the hall, and Seattle wasn't the kind of city where you left doors unlocked at midnight. His hand moved instinctively toward his phone, but before he could grab it, the door swung slowly open, and Victoria Langford walked into his apartment. For a moment, Daniel's brain simply refused to process what he was seeing. Victoria Langford. The Victoria Langford. CEO of Langford Systems, the tech company that had gone from startup to industry leader in less than 5 years. He'd seen her face on the covers of business magazines and grocery store checkout lines. He'd heard her name mentioned in the same breath as the titans of Seattle's tech scene, and he'd met her exactly 4 times. The first time had been 18 months ago, when Langford Systems contracted him to handle some emergency repairs on their server infrastructure after their regular IT team got overwhelmed. The second and third times had been follow-up visits for similar issues. The fourth time had been 3 weeks ago, a brief encounter in the hallway when he dropped off some replacement equipment. She'd been professional, courteous, and completely composed during every interaction. The kind of person who seemed to have an invisible force field of competence surrounding her at all times. The woman standing in his doorway now looked nothing like that person. Victoria's normally immaculate hair hung loose and slightly tangled around her shoulders. Her makeup was smudged beneath her eyes, and her expensive coat was buttoned wrong, like she'd dressed in a hurry without paying attention to what she was doing. But it was her eyes that struck Daniel the most, hollow, exhausted, carrying the weight of something far heavier than he could immediately understand. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know where else to go." He stood frozen, still processing the impossible scene unfolding in his kitchen. "Ms. Langford? Did I give you my address?" "You put it on the invoice," she said, looking down at her hands. I'm sorry. I know this is insane. I know I shouldn't be here, but Her voice cracked, and she stopped talking, her shoulders trembling slightly. Daniel's protective instincts, honed by years of single parenthood and a general inability to turn away people in distress, overrode his confusion. "Come inside," he said quietly, closing the door behind her. "Sit down. I'll make coffee." Victoria didn't move toward the table. Instead, she stood near the window that looked out over the parking lot, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to physically hold herself together. Daniel filled the coffee maker, hyper-aware of how small and shabby his apartment must seem to someone like her. The linoleum was cracked in places. The furniture was a mismatched collection of secondhand finds and pieces from his old life. Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator, held up by magnets shaped like fruit. "Is your daughter here?" Victoria asked suddenly. "She's asleep," Daniel said. "Don't worry, she sleeps through everything." Once slept through a car alarm going off right outside her window. A ghost of a smile flickered across Victoria's face, then disappeared. "I have two, a boy and a girl, 10 and 8. Daniel hadn't known that. In all their professional interactions, Victoria had never mentioned children, had never mentioned anything personal at all. She'd been a brilliant, slightly intimidating executive who paid her invoices on time and occasionally asked pointed technical questions that most CEOs wouldn't have understood well enough to ask. "They're good kids," Victoria continued, still staring out the window. "Smart, funny. They deserve so much better than what I've been giving them." The coffee maker gurgled, filling the apartment with the rich smell of dark roast. Daniel poured 2 cups, added cream to his, and brought both to the small table. "Sit," he said gently. "Whatever this is, you look like you need to sit down." Victoria finally turned from the window. She moved slowly, like someone who'd been running for miles and had finally stopped, only to realize how much everything hurt. She sat in the chair across from him, wrapping her hands around the coffee mug but not drinking. "I'm sorry," she said again. "This is completely inappropriate. You don't know me. I don't know you. We've spoken maybe a dozen times total, and always about servers and network configurations. And here I am showing up at your apartment after midnight like someone who needs help," Daniel finished quietly. Victoria looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. Her carefully maintained walls began to crack, and behind them was a depth of exhaustion and pain that made Daniel's chest tighten. "I left," she said. "Tonight. I finally left." "Left what?" "My marriage, my house, the life everyone thinks I have." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The life I've been pretending to have for 3 years." Daniel sipped his coffee, saying nothing. He'd learned, through hard experience with Emma, that sometimes people didn't need advice or solutions. They just needed someone to listen. "My husband and I have been separated in everything but name since before my daughter was born," Victoria continued. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam finally breaking. "We share a house. We show up to company events together. We smile for photographs. But we haven't had a real conversation in years. We sleep in separate bedrooms. We eat dinner in silence when we eat together at all." She paused, her fingers tightening around the mug. "He used to be supportive. When I first started Langford Systems, he was my biggest cheerleader. But somewhere along the way, when the company started succeeding, when I started succeeding more than he was in his own career, things changed. He became distant, resentful, cold." "Did he hurt you?" Daniel asked carefully. "Not physically, never that. But there are other ways to hurt someone." Victoria's voice dropped even lower. "He stopped participating in our lives, stopped helping with the kids, stopped pretending to care about anything I did. I'd come home from closing a major deal, something that would secure our family's future for generations, and he'd barely look up from his phone. When I needed him most, when my father was sick, when I was drowning in work and parenting and trying to hold everything together, he was just absent." Daniel thought about his own divorce, about Sarah's increasing detachment in those final months, how she'd started treating their marriage like a chore she was tired of doing, how relief had flickered across her face when he'd finally said the words they'd both been thinking. "This isn't working anymore." "Why did you stay?" he asked. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Because leaving felt like admitting failure. Because I've built a career on being strong, being decisive, being the person who fixes problems instead of running from them. Because everyone expects me to have it all figured out, the successful company, the perfect family, the beautiful life. How could I run a multi-million-dollar company if I couldn't even keep my own marriage together? Those aren't the same thing, Daniel said. I know that now. But for a long time, I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, pushed through, stayed strong, eventually things would get better. She finally lifted the mug to her lips, taking a small sip. They didn't get better. They got worse. The silence got heavier. The distance got wider. And I realized I was teaching my children that this is what love looks like. Two people sharing a space, but not a life. Going through the motions of a family while feeling completely alone. Daniel understood that fear intimately. It was the same fear that had driven him to finally end things with Sarah, despite the guilt and the logistics and the terror of splitting up Emma's world, the fear that staying together would hurt their daughter more than separating ever could. So tonight, Victoria continued, I packed bags for me and the kids. I told them we were going on an adventure. They were so excited. They've been sad for so long, even though they don't fully understand why. We left while he was at some work dinner, left a note, left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. Where are your kids now? Hotel, the Four Seasons downtown, they're asleep. I got them settled, made sure they were comfortable, and then I just started driving. I wasn't planning to come here. I wasn't planning anything. But I found myself pulling up outside your building, and I remembered. She trailed off. Remembered what? Victoria looked at him with something that might have been embarrassment or might have been desperate honesty. When I'm around you, I remember what normal feels like. Daniel blinked, completely unprepared for that statement. Every time you came to the office, Victoria explained, you were just real. You'd tell me about your daughter's soccer games. You'd mention being tired because she had a nightmare the night before. You'd laugh about the chaos of single parenting. You never treated me like Victoria Langford, CEO. You treated me like a person, and for those brief conversations, I got to feel like a person instead of a brand. She set down her coffee mug, her hands trembling slightly. I don't have anyone else I can talk to. Everyone in my life is either an employee, a business contact, or part of the social circle that expects me to maintain the illusion. My parents are wonderful, but they're old-fashioned. They'd support me, but they wouldn't understand why I couldn't just make it work. My friends, the few I have, are all in similar situations, living similar lives. And tonight, when everything finally broke, I realized I didn't want to call any of them. I wanted to talk to someone who wouldn't judge me or give me advice or tell me what the optics would be. You wanted someone who'd just listen, Daniel said. Yes. The word came out like a confession. And I know this is unfair to you. I know I'm putting you in an impossible position, showing up uninvited, unloading all of this. You don't owe me anything. You barely know me. Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking about the strange architecture of human connection. How sometimes the people who saw you most clearly were the ones who existed on the periphery of your life. How sometimes a stranger could offer more comfort than a longtime friend, simply because they came without history or expectations or the weight of what they thought you should be. I know what it's like, he finally said, to feel like you're drowning in a life that looks fine from the outside. Victoria's eyes met his, and in them he saw recognition. The recognition of someone who'd found an unexpected ally in an unexpected place. Tell me, she said quietly. So he did. Daniel told her about the last years of his marriage, about the growing distance between him and Sarah, about the fights that turned into silence, that turned into nothing at all. He told her about his divorce proceedings, about fighting for custody of Emma while his ex-wife's family's lawyers tried to paint him as unstable because he worked freelance instead of holding a real job. He told her about the fear that he was failing his daughter, about the nights when he lay awake wondering if Emma would grow up damaged by her parents' inability to love each other. But she's happy, Victoria observed. I can tell from the way you talk about her, she's happy. Most of the time, Daniel agreed. She has rough moments. She misses her mom, even though Sarah's visit schedule is inconsistent at best. But yeah, overall, she's better than she was when Sarah and I were still together. Kids are perceptive. They know when something's wrong, even if they can't articulate it. My son asked me last week if his dad still loved us, Victoria said, her voice breaking. He's 10 years old, and he's already figured out that something fundamental is missing from our family. I told him, of course, his father loved him. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't enough. Love isn't just a word you say. It's a thing you show, a presence you maintain, and his father has been absent for so long. What did your husband say? About you leaving? I don't know. I haven't answered his calls. Victoria glanced at her phone, which sat face down on the table. There are 17 missed calls, 11 texts. I can't talk to him yet. If I talk to him, he'll be logical. He'll be calm. He'll point out all the ways this disrupts our lives, all the reasons we should reconsider, all the optics we need to manage. And I'm so tired of being logical. I'm so tired of managing optics. You don't have to talk to him tonight, Daniel said. You don't have to make any decisions tonight. You just need to breathe. Victoria laughed, a real laugh this time, though tears were starting to slide down her cheeks. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired enough to know the difference between urgent and important. Your kids are safe. You're safe. Everything else can wait until morning. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable silence that usually only existed between old friends. The clock ticked toward 1 a.m. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the kitchen before fading back to darkness. Can I ask you something? Victoria finally said. Sure. Why aren't you freaking out? I'm a near stranger who broke into your apartment. The door was unlocked, Daniel interrupted. Apparently. She smiled faintly. Fine. I'm a near stranger who let herself into your apartment after midnight, crying about her personal problems. Most people would have called the police. Daniel considered the question seriously. I guess because you remind me of myself a year ago, right after the divorce finalized. I had this moment where I realized I'd been holding myself together through sheer force of will for months, and suddenly I didn't have to anymore. The marriage was over. The custody was settled. Emma was adjusting. And I just collapsed. Emotionally, I mean. I spent a whole weekend on this couch, barely moving, just letting myself feel everything I'd been pushing down. Did it help? Eventually. First it felt like dying, but yeah, after that, it helped. He met her eyes. Sometimes you have to fall apart before you can figure out how to put yourself back together in a better way. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm terrified I'm making a mistake, that I'm being selfish, that I'm damaging my kids more by leaving than I would by staying. You're not. How can you be sure? Because I've seen what staying does to kids. My parents stayed together for the kids until I graduated high school. They were miserable for years, and we all knew it. The day I left for college, they filed for divorce. You know what I felt? Relief. And anger that they'd wasted so much time being unhappy when they could have just been honest. Victoria absorbed this, nodding slowly. My parents have been married for 42 years. They're still in love. They still hold hands. They still laugh at each other's jokes. I thought that's what I'd have. I thought if I just tried hard enough, we'd get there. Some relationships are worth fighting for, Daniel said gently. But some relationships are just over, and no amount of fighting will change that. How do you know the difference? I think you already know. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. More silence. Victoria drained the last of her coffee, then stood and walked back to the window. The parking lot was empty except for a few scattered cars gleaming wetly under the streetlights. I should go, she said. Let you sleep. You probably have work tomorrow. Emma has a half day at school and my afternoon appointment canceled, Daniel said. I'm fine. But Victoria was already gathering herself, reconstructing the armor she'd arrived without. Daniel could see it happening in real time, her shoulders straightening, her expression smoothing, the CEO mask sliding back into place. Thank you, she said formally. For the coffee and the conversation, I apologize for the intrusion. Victoria. She stopped, one hand on the door. You don't have to apologize for being human, Daniel said, and you don't have to put the mask back on. Not here. For a moment, he thought she might break down again, but instead she just nodded, a small, grateful gesture that said more than words could have. Can I? She hesitated. Can I come back? Not tonight, obviously, but sometime, just to talk. Anytime, Daniel said, meaning it. Victoria smiled then, a real smile that transformed her tired face into something softer and more genuine. You're a good person, Daniel Carter. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. After she left, Daniel stood in his kitchen for a long time trying to process what had just happened. The CEO of one of Seattle's most successful companies had just poured her heart out at his kitchen table, had trusted him with her pain, her fear, her carefully hidden truth. He cleaned up the coffee mugs, checked on Emma, still sleeping peacefully, and finally climbed into his own bed around 2 a.m. Sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept replaying the conversation, the look in Victoria's eyes, the weight of her confession. He told her she could come back. He wondered if she actually would. 3 days later, on a rainy Thursday evening, there was a knock on his door. Not the middle of the night intrusion this time, but a proper knock at 7 p.m. after he and Emma had finished dinner and she was sprawled on the living room floor working on homework. Daniel opened the door to find Victoria standing there, looking more put together than she had during that first visit, but still carrying shadows under her eyes that spoke of difficult days. "Hi," she said. "Is this a bad time?" "Emma, we have a visitor," Daniel called over his shoulder. To Victoria, he said, "Come in." Emma looked up from her math worksheet, her eyes widening. "Whoa, are you famous?" Victoria laughed, surprised. "What makes you think that?" "You look like you should be on TV," Emma said, matter-of-factly. "Like a news person or something." "Emma, manners," Daniel said, but he was smiling. "I'm Victoria," she said, crouching down to Emma's level. "And you must be Emma. Your dad talks about you all the time." "He does?" Emma looked at Daniel with delight. "Every chance he gets," Victoria confirmed. "He says you're the best artist in your entire class." Emma beamed. "I'm pretty good. Want to see my latest drawing? It's a dragon princess." "I would love to see a dragon princess." And just like that, Victoria was absorbed into the chaos of Daniel's ordinary evening. She sat on the floor with Emma, admiring the dragon princess and asking questions about the kingdom she ruled and whether dragons preferred caves or castles. Daniel made tea, watching this unexpected scene unfold in his living room. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, after extracting a promise from Victoria that she'd come back and see the next dragon drawing, Daniel and Victoria sat on the couch, mugs of tea cooling on the coffee table between them. "How are you?" Daniel asked. "Surviving," Victoria said. "I filed for divorce yesterday. Made it official. My lawyer says it'll be straightforward since we'd already legally separated our finances years ago. Just need to work out custody arrangements." "How's your husband handling it?" "With lawyers and logic, exactly like I predicted, he wants to negotiate everything through attorneys. Won't even talk to me directly." She sounded more tired than angry. "But the kids are doing okay. Better than okay, actually. It's like they've been released from something. They're louder, more energetic. My daughter laughed so hard at breakfast this morning that she snorted orange juice out of her nose." Daniel smiled. "That's a good sign. I found us a house, smaller than what we had, closer to downtown. The kids can stay in their same schools. We move in next month." She paused. "I keep waiting for the guilt to crush me, for the regret, but mostly I just feel lighter." "That's not selfishness," Daniel said. "That's relief." They talked until late about everything and nothing, about the logistics of single parenting and the challenges of running a company while rebuilding a personal life, about Emma's upcoming school play and Victoria's son's obsession with astronomy, about the small victories and the persistent fears. When Victoria finally left around 11, she paused at the door. "Same time next week?" "Whenever you want," Daniel said. And so it became a pattern. Once a week, sometimes twice, Victoria would appear at Daniel's door. Sometimes she brought her kids, who'd tumble into the apartment and immediately absorb Emma into whatever game they'd invented that day. Sometimes she came alone, needing adult conversation and the absence of judgment. Daniel never asked for anything, never pushed for more than she was willing to give. He just existed as a steady presence in the chaos of her transformation, someone who'd seen her at her lowest and hadn't looked away. One evening, about 6 weeks after that first midnight visit, Victoria arrived carrying takeout containers and a bottle of wine. "The kids are with my parents tonight," she explained, "and I realized I've been monopolizing your time without ever properly thanking you." "You don't need to thank me," Daniel said, but he accepted the wine and helped her set out the food. Thai curry that filled the apartment with the smell of coconut and lemongrass. They ate and talked, and somewhere during the second glass of wine, the conversation shifted, became more personal, more vulnerable. "Can I tell you something I haven't told anyone else?" Victoria asked. "Always. I'm terrified I'm never going to be able to trust someone again. that my marriage broke something fundamental in me. She stared into her wine glass. For 3 years, I lived with someone who was supposed to love me, but couldn't even be bothered to ask how my day was, who'd look right through me like I was furniture. And now I can't imagine letting anyone that close again. Daniel was quiet, understanding the fear behind the words. I felt that way too. After Sarah, like I'd used up my one chance at a real partnership and failed. Do you still feel that way? Less than I did. Time helps. And honestly, being Emma's dad helps more. She reminds me every day that I'm capable of unconditional love, even if romantic love didn't work out the way I planned. Victoria smiled softly. You're really good at this, the parenting thing. Emma adores you. I'm making it up as I go, same as everyone else. No, Victoria said firmly. You're doing more than that. You're present. You listen. You make her feel like she matters. That's not nothing. That's everything. The intensity in her voice made Daniel look at her more closely. In the soft light of his living room lamps, Victoria looked younger than her 40 years, more open than he'd ever seen her. Can I ask you something? He said carefully. Anything. Why me? I mean, I'm glad you felt like you could come here, but you must have other friends. Other people you trust. Victoria considered the question seriously. I told you before, you make me feel normal, but it's more than that. You've never wanted anything from me. Everyone else in my life wants something. My employees want leadership and vision. My investors want returns. My parents want me to be happy, but also to maintain the family reputation. Even my kids, as much as I love them, need things from me constantly. But you, she trailed off, searching for words. You just let me exist. No expectations, no agenda, just space to be myself. That's what friends do, Daniel said quietly. Is that what we are? Friends? I hope so. Victoria set down her wine glass and moved closer on the couch, close enough that Daniel could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that he'd never be able to afford. I value your friendship more than you know, she said. It's been a lifeline these past couple months. Same here, Daniel admitted. You've reminded me that my world doesn't have to be as small as it's become, that it's okay to connect with people outside the parent-schoolwork triangle I've built. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders nearly touching, the space between them charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Finally, Victoria stood, gathering her things. I should go. Let you get some sleep. Daniel walked her to the door, as he always did. But this time, before leaving, Victoria turned and hugged him. A real hug. Not a polite social gesture, but the kind of embrace that said, thank you for seeing me, and I'm grateful you exist, and I don't know what comes next, but I'm glad you're here for it. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder, for everything. Any time, Daniel said, and meant it with his whole heart. After she left, he cleaned up the dinner dishes and thought about friendship and timing and the strange ways people came into your life exactly when you needed them most. He didn't let himself think beyond that. Didn't let himself examine the warmth that spread through his chest when Victoria smiled. Didn't analyze the way she'd started touching his arm when she laughed, or how she'd begun texting him random thoughts throughout the day. They were friends. That was enough. It had to be enough, because anything more was impossible. She was Victoria Langford, CEO, pulling herself out of a difficult divorce. He was Daniel Carter, freelance tech guy, still figuring out single parenthood. Their worlds had intersected through circumstance and crisis, but that didn't mean they could actually build something together. Did it? The question hung in Daniel's mind for days, circling like a persistent bird looking for a place to land. He tried to dismiss it, tried to focus on work and Emma and the ordinary demands of his life. But it kept returning, especially during those quiet moments when Victoria's laugh echoed in his memory, or when he found himself checking his phone more often than necessary, hoping for one of her random text messages. 3 weeks after that wine and Thai food evening, Daniel was picking Emma up from school when he spotted Victoria's car in the parking lot. She was leaning against the driver's side door, scrolling through her phone with the distracted intensity of someone trying to avoid their own thoughts. Emma saw her first and took off running before Daniel could stop her. Victoria! Victoria looked up, her professional mask slipping into genuine warmth as Emma barreled toward her. Hey, kiddo, what are you doing here? I go to school here, silly, Emma giggled. What are you doing here? Picking up my daughter. She's in 5th grade. Victoria glanced toward the school entrance where kids were starting to stream out. Lily, over here! A girl with dark hair pulled into a ponytail emerged from the crowd, followed by a slightly younger boy with the same sharp, intelligent eyes as his mother. Both kids lit up when they saw Emma, and within seconds, all three were chattering about something involving playground politics and a legendary kickball game. Daniel approached more slowly, shoving his hands in his jacket pockets. Small world. Apparently, Victoria said, smiling, I had no idea Emma went to Clearwater Elementary. We just transferred the kids here last week, closer to our new house. How's the move going? Chaotic. Boxes everywhere. My son can't find his favorite astronomy book and is convinced it's been lost forever in the void. My daughter has decided this is the perfect time to adopt a puppy, despite my repeated explanations that we're barely managing to feed ourselves regularly. She paused, her smile softening. But it's good chaos, if that makes sense. It did make sense. Daniel remembered the early days after his divorce, when every day felt like organized disaster, but somehow that disaster felt cleaner than the suffocating pretense that had preceded it. Mom, can Emma come over? Lily asked, tugging on Victoria's sleeve. Please, we can show her our new house, and Mason can explain constellations, and we have that new board game we haven't even opened yet. Emma turned pleading eyes on Daniel. Can I, Dad? Please? Daniel hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden shift from chance encounter to social planning. I don't know, Em. Ms. Langford probably has things to do. It's Victoria, she interrupted gently. And actually, if you're free, you're both welcome. Fair warning, though, the house is still half unpacked, and I was planning to order pizza because I haven't figured out where I packed the cooking pans. Pizza! All three kids shouted in unison. Daniel found himself nodding before he'd fully processed the implications. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Victoria's new house was in a quiet neighborhood about 15 minutes from the school, the kind of area where old trees lined the streets and houses had actual front porches instead of just concrete stoops. It wasn't the mansion Daniel had vaguely imagined a tech CEO would live in, but it was spacious and warm, with large windows that let in the late afternoon light. True to Victoria's warning, moving boxes were stacked in corners and against walls, labeled in neat handwriting that somehow made the chaos seem intentional. The kids disappeared upstairs immediately, their laughter echoing through the half-empty rooms. Sorry about the mess, Victoria said, leading Daniel into a kitchen that was surprisingly functional despite the boxes. The movers were very efficient with the essentials, but everything else is just wherever. It's fine, Daniel assured her. You should have seen my place after the divorce. I lived out of boxes for 3 months because I couldn't face unpacking. Every time I opened one, it felt like excavating a life that didn't exist anymore. Victoria paused in the act of pulling takeout menus from a drawer, something flickering across her face. That's exactly it. Every item you unpack is a decision about what kind of life you're building now. It's exhausting. It gets easier, Daniel said. Eventually, unpacking just becomes unpacking instead of an existential crisis. She laughed, a real laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes. I'm holding you to that promise. She handed him a stack of menus. Pick your pizza poison. The kids will eat anything as long as it involves cheese. They settled on a local place that promised delivery within the hour. Then Victoria gave him a tour of the house while the kids built what sounded like an elaborate fort upstairs. The living room had a fireplace that Victoria admitted she had no idea how to use. The dining room held a beautiful table that had belonged to her grandmother, one of the few pieces she'd insisted on taking from her old house. Upstairs, in addition to the kids' rooms, was a small office with a view of the backyard. This is where I'll pretend to maintain work-life balance, Victoria said wryly, gesturing to the empty desk. In reality, I'll probably end up working from the kitchen table like I always do. Nothing wrong with the kitchen table, Daniel said. Some of my best work happens there, usually around midnight when I should be sleeping. They ended up back in the kitchen, and Victoria pulled 2 beers from the nearly empty refrigerator. I know it's only 4:30, but I'm declaring it acceptable given the circumstances. What circumstances? Surviving the week, surviving the move, surviving in general. She clinked her bottle against his. To survival. To survival, Daniel echoed. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the kids' laughter drifting down from upstairs. Through the kitchen window, Daniel could see a backyard with a swing set and a small garden area that had been recently cleared. "Your kids seem happy," he observed. "They are. Happier than I've seen them in years." Victoria leaned against the counter, her expression thoughtful. "Lily told me last night that our new house feels like it's breathing. I asked her what she meant, and she said our old house always felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something bad to happen. But this house just breathes normally." The observation, filtered through a 10-year-old's perception, hit harder than any adult articulation could have. Daniel thought about Emma's similar comments after the divorce, how she'd said their apartment felt lighter, even though it was smaller and had fewer of her toys. "Kids are perceptive," he said quietly. "They pick up on things we think we're hiding." "I know. That's what finally pushed me to leave. Watching my kids tiptoe around their own father, trying to be quiet enough, good enough, invisible enough that he might actually notice them." Her voice hardened slightly. "I could handle him ignoring me. I'd made peace with that years ago. But watching him dismiss our children, seeing them internalize that rejection, I couldn't do it anymore." Daniel wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the pain still evident in her voice. But before he could find the words, the doorbell rang. "Pizza's here," Victoria said, shaking off the heavy moment. "Let me grab my wallet." Dinner was gloriously chaotic. The kids insisted on eating in the living room despite the lack of furniture, spreading out on a blanket like it was an indoor picnic. They talked over each other, sharing stories about school and friends and the elaborate fantasy world they'd apparently created during their fort-building session upstairs. Mason, Victoria's 8-year-old son, was particularly fascinated by the fact that Daniel fixed computers for a living. "Can you fix anything?" he asked, eyes wide. "Like, if a robot broke, could you fix it?" "Depends on the robot," Daniel said seriously. "What kind of robot are we talking about?" "A Mars rover, like the one NASA has." "Well, I've never fixed a Mars rover specifically, but I imagine the principles are similar. You'd need to diagnose the problem first, figure out which systems are failing, then either repair or replace the broken components." Mason absorbed this with the intensity of someone filing away important information. "Do you think they have repair people on Mars? Like, what if the rover breaks and there's nobody there to fix it?" "That's why they have remote diagnostics," Victoria interjected, ruffling her son's hair. "Engineers on Earth can try to fix problems from millions of miles away." "That's so cool," Mason breathed. "I'm going to work for NASA when I grow up." "You'll be great at it," Daniel said, and meant it. The kid had the kind of curiosity that couldn't be taught, the same relentless questioning that drove real innovation. After dinner, while the kids retreated back upstairs to continue their fort project, Daniel helped Victoria clean up the pizza boxes and paper plates. They worked in easy synchronization, him gathering trash while she wiped down surfaces, moving around each other in the kitchen like they'd done this 100 times before. "Thank you for staying," Victoria said as she loaded cups into the dishwasher. "I know this probably wasn't how you planned to spend your Friday evening." "Are you kidding? This beats my original plan of reheating leftover pasta and watching Emma do cartwheels in the living room for 2 hours. Victoria laughed. "Lily went through a gymnastics phase last year. Everything was a performance. I couldn't walk through a room without being instructed to watch some new move she'd invented." "Is Emma doing that in the living room now?" Daniel asked, hearing a suspicious series of thumps from upstairs. "Probably, along with interpretive dance and possibly amateur acrobatics." She closed the dishwasher and turned to face him, her expression shifting to something more serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever feel guilty? About the divorce, I mean, even though you know it was the right choice?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "Sometimes. Usually late at night when I'm overthinking everything. I'll wonder if I gave up too easily, if I should have tried harder to make it work. But then I remember what it was actually like at the end, the constant tension, the walking on eggshells, the way Emma would get this look on her face when Sarah and I were in the same room, like she was bracing for impact. And I know we did the right thing." "How long did it take before you stopped second-guessing yourself?" "I still do sometimes, but less often. Maybe once a month now instead of once a day." He paused. "Why? Are you second-guessing?" "Not exactly. I know leaving was right. I feel it in my bones, but I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For my ex to fight me on custody or try to turn the kids against me or drag this out in some vindictive way. He's been too quiet, too cooperative. It makes me nervous. Maybe he's just as relieved as you are. Maybe. Victoria didn't sound convinced. Or maybe he's planning something. He's strategic, always thinking 3 moves ahead. I can't shake the feeling that his easy acceptance is part of some larger plan I can't see yet. Before Daniel could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and winced. Sarah? Your ex? Yeah, she wants to talk about potentially taking Emma for an extra week next month, which would be fine, except she's canceled the last 3 visits at the last minute, and Emma's starting to expect the disappointment. He typed out a quick response, keeping his tone neutral and non-committal. That's hard, Victoria said softly. The inconsistency is worse than just having a set schedule, even if that schedule means less time. Exactly. Emma can handle her mom being in Portland. She can handle only seeing her twice a month. What she can't handle is building up hope and then having it crushed repeatedly. He shoved his phone back in his pocket with more force than necessary. Sorry, not your problem. Daniel! Victoria waited until he looked at her. We're friends, remember? Your problems are allowed to exist here too. This isn't a one-way street where I dump my issues and you absorb them silently. The simple acknowledgement loosened something in his chest. For months now he'd been Victoria's sounding board, her safe space, her midnight confidant. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed someone to return that favor until she explicitly offered it. Thanks, he said quietly. That means more than you know. They migrated to the living room where Victoria had managed to unpack a single couch. They sat on opposite ends, a comfortable distance between them, and talked about co-parenting and logistics and the 1,000 small ways ex-spouses could make your life complicated even after the marriage ended. My ex wants to introduce the kids to his new girlfriend, Victoria said at one point. They've apparently been dating for 6 months. 6 months he was still living in our house, still pretending to be working late, and he had a whole separate relationship happening. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. Wait, he was cheating? I don't know if it counts as cheating when you're already emotionally divorced, but yes, technically, he was involved with someone else before we separated. She picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. Part of me is furious. Part of me is just relieved that he's someone else's problem now. You're allowed to feel both things. I know, but I keep thinking about the kids. What if they love her? What if she's wonderful and nurturing and everything I haven't had the energy to be while running a company and managing a divorce? Victoria. Daniel waited until she met his eyes. You're an amazing mom. Your kids adore you. Some new girlfriend showing up isn't going to change that. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I see the way Lily and Mason look at you. I hear the way they talk about you when you're not in the room. You're their world. Everything else is just noise. Victoria's eyes glistened slightly, but she blinked the tears back. You're very good at saying exactly what I need to hear. I'm just telling you the truth. Upstairs, something crashed, followed by immediate silence. Then Emma's voice calling down, We're okay, nothing's broken. That's not reassuring, Daniel called back. Maybe 70% reassuring, Victoria amended. They did report in, which means nobody's unconscious. The bar for parenting success gets lower every year, Daniel said. Last week I considered it a victory that both my kids wore matching socks to school. They weren't clean socks, but they matched. They dissolved into laughter, the kind that came from shared exhaustion and the absurdity of trying to maintain any standards while keeping small humans alive. When the laughter finally subsided, Victoria wiped her eyes and smiled at Daniel with such genuine warmth that he felt his carefully maintained boundaries begin to blur. I'm really glad you're in my life, she said softly. I don't think I could have gotten through these past few months without you. You would have been fine, Daniel said, but his voice came out rougher than intended. You're one of the strongest people I know. Strength isn't the same as not needing people. I'm learning that slowly. She shifted on the couch, angling toward him slightly. You've taught me that it's okay to lean on someone, that asking for help isn't weakness. You've taught me things too. Like what? Like, it's okay to want more than just survival. That building something new doesn't mean betraying what came before. He paused, aware that he was edging into dangerous territory but unable to stop himself. You've reminded me that my life doesn't have to be small just because it's careful. The air between them shifted, charged with something neither had quite acknowledged until now. Victoria's gaze held his, and in her eyes he saw the same question he'd been asking himself for weeks. What are we doing here? What is this becoming? Daniel, she started, but was interrupted by the thunder of footsteps on the stairs. All three kids tumbled into the living room, breathless and disheveled. Can we watch a movie? Lily asked. We found the DVD player in one of the boxes upstairs. The moment broke, the tension dissipating like smoke. Victoria glanced at the clock. It's almost 7:30. Don't you guys have homework? Did it at school during study hall? Mason said promptly. All of it? Victoria's skeptical mom voice was out in full force. Most of it. The important parts. That's not how homework works, buddy. Can we still watch a movie? Victoria looked at Daniel, a silent question in her expression. He should probably take Emma home. Should retreat to the safety of his own apartment and the clear boundaries of friendship. Should stop spending so much time in Victoria's orbit before he started wanting things he had no business wanting. Instead, he heard himself say, 30 minutes? Then we need to head home because someone has soccer practice early tomorrow morning. Emma groaned but accepted the compromise. The kids queued up some animated film about talking animals while Victoria made popcorn and Daniel tried to figure out when exactly his life had shifted from solitary, single-dad routine to Friday nights in Victoria Langford's living room. They ended up staying for the whole movie. Somehow, 30 minutes turned into an hour and a half, with Emma curled up against Daniel's side and Mason sprawled across Victoria's lap, his eyes drooping as the movie's climax played out. Lily sat on the floor, completely absorbed in the story. When the credits finally rolled, Mason was fully asleep, and Emma wasn't far behind. I should get her home, Daniel whispered, carefully extracting himself from his drowsy daughter. Yeah. Victoria looked down at her sleeping son, a soft smile on her face. This one's going to wake up at 3 a.m. completely disoriented about where he is. Daniel scooped Emma into his arms. She mumbled something incoherent and wrapped her arms around his neck, her head heavy against his shoulder. Victoria walked them to the door, Lily trailing behind to say goodbye. Thanks again for coming over, Victoria said quietly, so as not to wake Emma. This was really nice. It was, Daniel agreed, and it had been. Comfortable and easy, and exactly what he hadn't known he'd been missing. Victoria reached out and squeezed his free hand briefly. Drive safe. Always do. The drive home was quiet, Emma snoring softly in the back seat. Daniel's mind replayed the evening in fragments, Victoria's laugh, the easy way they'd moved around each other in the kitchen, that charged moment on the couch before the kids interrupted, the way her hand had felt in his, warm and certain and right. He was in trouble. He knew it with the kind of clarity that came from standing on the edge of something irrevocable and recognizing it for what it was. Somewhere along the way, Victoria had stopped being just a friend or just someone he was helping through a crisis. She'd become someone he actively wanted in his life, someone whose presence made everything feel more vibrant and possible. But wanting something didn't make it viable. Victoria was still navigating a divorce, still rebuilding her life, still figuring out who she was outside of a failed marriage and public expectations. The last thing she needed was romantic complications from someone who existed in an entirely different economic and social universe. Over the next few weeks, Daniel tried to maintain appropriate distance. He still responded to Victoria's texts, still accepted invitations for the kids to play together, but he tried to be more careful about the time they spent alone together. Tried not to read too much into the way she smiled at him, or how often she found excuses to touch his arm while talking. Victoria noticed. Of course she noticed. She was brilliant and perceptive and had built a career on reading people. One evening, after dropping Emma off for a sleepover at a friend's house, Daniel came home to find Victoria sitting on his apartment building's front steps. She stood when she saw him, her expression determined. We need to talk, she said. Daniel's stomach dropped. Okay. Can we go inside? He unlocked his apartment, hyper-aware of her presence behind him, and they ended up in the kitchen like they always did. But this time Victoria didn't sit down. She stood near the counter, her arms crossed, her CEO posture back in full force. You've been avoiding me, she said bluntly. I haven't... Daniel. Don't insult my intelligence. You've been distant for 3 weeks. Short responses to texts. Always busy when I suggest getting together. What changed? He could lie. Could make up some excuse about work being busy or Emma needing more attention. But they'd built their entire friendship on honesty, and he couldn't bring himself to undermine that now. I needed some space, he admitted, to think. About what? About this. Us. What we're doing. Victoria's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her face. And what conclusion did you reach? That I'm getting too attached, that I need to be more careful about boundaries because you're going through a divorce and figuring out your life, and you don't need me complicating things by developing feelings I have no business having. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria stared at him, her eyes wide, and Daniel felt his face heat with embarrassment. He'd said too much, revealed too much, ruined the one good thing he'd had going. Then Victoria laughed. Not a dismissive laugh, but one tinged with relief and disbelief and something that might have been joy. You idiot, she said, but there was no anger in it. You beautiful, thoughtful idiot. Daniel blinked. What? Victoria crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and grabbed his hands, holding them firmly. I've been going crazy trying to figure out how to tell you that I have feelings for you without scaring you off or making things weird or moving too fast. And here you've been pulling away to protect me from your feelings? His brain stuttered, trying to process this information. You... what? I have feelings for you, Daniel. Real, terrifying, inconvenient feelings that I've been trying to ignore because you're right. The timing is terrible, and I'm still technically married, and this is probably a disaster waiting to happen. She squeezed his hands. But I can't keep pretending that you're just my friend. You're more than that. You've been more than that for a while now. Daniel's heart was hammering so hard he was surprised it wasn't audible. Victoria, I know all the reasons this is a bad idea, she continued, her words tumbling out faster now. I know I should wait until the divorce is final. I know we're from different worlds. I know there are 1,000 practical concerns and complications. But Daniel, when I'm with you, I feel like myself. Like the person I was before I spent years pretending to be someone I wasn't. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. He stared at her, at this brilliant, powerful woman who'd somehow decided that he, freelance tech guy, single dad, thoroughly ordinary person, was worth this kind of vulnerability. Say something, Victoria whispered, and he could hear the fear beneath the bravado. Please. Daniel pulled one hand free and cupped her face gently. I think you're amazing. I think about you constantly. I think I started falling for you the night you showed up at my door looking like your world was ending, and I haven't stopped since. Victoria's breath caught. Really? Really. But I meant what I said about the timing. I don't want to be the rebound guy. I don't want to be the thing you regret when you look back on this period of your life. You could never be a regret, Victoria said fiercely. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. Then let's do this right, Daniel said. Let's wait until your divorce is final, until you've had time to really stand on your own and figure out who you are outside of that marriage. And if you still feel this way when the dust settles, when you've had time and space and clarity, then we'll figure it out. Together. Victoria looked like she wanted to argue, but slowly she nodded. You're right. I hate it, but you're right. I don't want to waste time either, Daniel said softly. But I also don't want to build something real on a foundation that's still shaking. So what do we do in the meantime? We keep being friends. We keep being honest with each other. We let our kids keep playing together. And we trust that if this is real, if it's meant to be something more, it'll still be there when the timing's better. Victoria leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. You're too good to be true. You know that, right? I'm really not. I'm just trying to do the right thing for once in my life. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, their hands still clasped between them. It wasn't a kiss, wasn't a dramatic declaration, but somehow it felt more intimate than either of those things would have been. Finally, Victoria pulled back slightly. I should go, before I talk myself into ignoring all your very reasonable points. Probably wise, Daniel agreed, even though every part of him wanted her to stay. At the door, Victoria paused and turned back. Daniel? Thank you for being patient, for being you. Always, he said, and watched her walk away into the night, already counting the days until he'd see her again. The waiting was harder than Daniel had anticipated, not because the feelings faded or the connection weakened, but because every interaction now carried the weight of possibility. Every casual text message felt charged with subtext. Every accidental brush of hand sent electricity through his nervous system. Every time Victoria looked at him with those warm, knowing eyes, he had to remind himself why they were doing this the hard way. The kids made it both easier and more complicated. Emma and Lily had become inseparable, with Mason tagging along as the self-appointed science expert of their trio. Weekend playdates became routine, which meant Daniel and Victoria spent hours in each other's company, navigating the delicate balance between friendship and something more. One Saturday afternoon in early November, Daniel arrived at Victoria's house to pick up Emma and found chaos in full swing. Mason was in tears over a failed science project. Lily was practicing a dance routine at maximum volume in the living room, and Victoria stood in the kitchen surrounded by the remnants of what appeared to be an exploded smoothie. "Don't ask," she said when she saw Daniel's expression. "Just don't ask." "I wasn't going to," he lied, eyeing the purple liquid dripping down the cabinet doors. The blender lid wasn't on properly. Mason's volcano didn't erupt the way it was supposed to. Lily has a recital next week and is convinced she's going to forget the entire routine. My ex called to inform me he's getting engaged to his girlfriend and wants to have a family discussion about it with the kids, and I have a board meeting in 2 hours that I'm completely unprepared for. She grabbed a towel and started wiping purple goo off the counter with jerky, frustrated movements. Daniel gently took the towel from her hands. "Go get ready for your meeting. I've got this." "Daniel, you don't have to." "Victoria, go. I've got this." She looked at him for a long moment, something soft and grateful flickering across her face, then nodded and disappeared upstairs. Daniel surveyed the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. 20 minutes later, the kitchen was clean, Mason's volcano had been troubleshooted and successfully erupted in the backyard, and Lily had an audience of 3 for her dance routine, which she performed with the dramatic flair of a Broadway star. When Victoria came back downstairs, dressed in a sharp business suit with her hair pulled back and her CEO armor firmly in place, she stopped in the doorway and just stared. "You fixed everything," she said quietly. "Just the smoothie explosion and the volcano. Jury's still out on the dance routine, but I think Lily's got it handled." "I heard that," Lily called from the living room, "and I totally have it handled." Victoria's eyes were suspiciously bright. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to. That's what—" He almost said partners, but caught himself. "That's what friends do." Something flickered in Victoria's expression, there and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "Right, friends." She glanced at her watch. "I need to go. The meeting's downtown and traffic will be terrible." "Go. We'll hold down the fort." After she left, Daniel ordered pizza for the kids and helped Mason refine his science presentation, while Emma and Lily choreographed increasingly elaborate dance routines. It felt natural stepping into this space in Victoria's life. More natural than it probably should have. His phone buzzed around 7 p.m. Victoria's name lit up the screen. "Meeting ran long," her voice said when he answered. "I'm so sorry. I'll be there as soon as I can." "Take your time. We're fine. The kids are arguing about whether dragons could theoretically exist if we used advanced genetic engineering, so they're well entertained." He could hear the smile in her voice. "You're amazing, you know that?" "I'm really not. I'm just hanging out with some cool kids." "Daniel," her voice dropped lower, more intimate. "You are. Amazing, I mean. And She stopped abruptly. "I should let you go. I'll be there soon." After she hung up, Daniel stood holding his phone for a moment, replaying the conversation and all the things that had gone unsaid beneath the surface of ordinary words. Emma appeared at his elbow. "Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart? Do you like Victoria?" Daniel's heart skipped. "Of course I like her. She's nice." "No, I mean like her, the way grown-ups do." Out of the mouths of observant 6-year-olds. Daniel crouched down to Emma's level. "Why do you ask?" Emma shrugged with the elaborate casualness only children could manage. "You smile different when she's around, and you look at her the way Prince Philip looks at Princess Aurora in Sleeping Beauty." "That's a very specific observation." "Lily said her mom smiles different around you too. We were talking about it." Daniel's eyebrows shot up. You and Lily discussed this? And Mason. He said adults are obvious when they like each other, but pretend they don't notice. He's very smart about stuff like that. Emma tilted her head, studying him with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. So do you? Like her? There was no point in lying to his daughter. She'd already figured it out anyway. Yeah, Em, I do, but it's complicated. Because she's still married to someone else? Technically separated, but yes, that's part of it. But you're waiting until it's not complicated anymore? Something like that. Emma considered this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. I think that's good. Waiting means it's important. That's what you always tell me when I want to do something before I'm ready. Daniel pulled his daughter into a hug, marveling at her wisdom. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Dad. You just don't always notice. Victoria arrived home an hour later looking exhausted but triumphant. The meeting went well. We're launching a new product line next quarter, and the board actually listened to my concerns about the timeline instead of just pushing for faster results. That's great, Daniel said, meaning it. He'd learned enough about her work over the past months to understand the constant battle between innovation and investor pressure. It is, but I'm completely drained. She collapsed onto the couch beside him. The kids had migrated upstairs to Mason's room, their voices a distant hum of conversation. How were they? Perfect. Mason's volcano is going to blow everyone's minds at the science fair. Lily's dance routine is Tony-worthy, and Emma declared herself the director of their new Dragon Genetics Research Initiative. Victoria laughed, the sound tired but genuine. Of course she did. She leaned her head back against the couch, closing her eyes. I don't know what I would have done without you today. Probably had a breakdown in the middle of the board meeting. You would have been fine. You always are. I don't always feel fine. Her eyes were still closed, her voice soft. Most days I feel like I'm one crisis away from falling apart completely, but then you show up and somehow everything seems manageable again. Daniel knew he should keep his distance, maintain the boundaries they'd agreed on, but she looked so vulnerable, so exhausted, and his hand seemed to move of its own accord, reaching over to squeeze hers. Victoria's fingers intertwined with his immediately, holding on like he was an anchor in rough seas. They sat like that in silence, hands clasped, while the old house settled around them and their children's laughter drifted down from upstairs. My divorce is almost final, Victoria said eventually, her eyes still closed. My lawyer says another month, maybe 6 weeks. Daniel's heart rate picked up. That's good. It is. It's been remarkably civil, all things considered. We agreed on custody arrangements, alternating weeks, major holidays split. The financial division was straightforward since we'd kept everything separate for years anyway. He didn't fight me on anything. That's unusual, isn't it? Very. My lawyer keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop, but I think he's just ready to move on. Start his new life with his fiancée without the weight of our failed marriage hanging over him. She opened her eyes and turned to look at Daniel. I told him about you. Daniel's breath caught. You did? Not everything, just that I'd been spending time with you, that we were friends, that you'd been helping me through the transition. She paused. He said he was glad I had someone, that he hoped I'd be happy. How did that feel? Strange, like getting permission I didn't realize I'd been waiting for. We've spent so long being nothing to each other that his blessing felt both meaningless and oddly important. Her thumb traced small circles on the back of Daniel's hand. He asked if you were the reason I left. I told him no, that I left because of us, because of what we'd become. You were just the catalyst that helped me see it clearly. Was I? You were. You showed me what it looked like when someone actually paid attention, when someone listened and cared and showed up. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Victoria's voice got quieter. You reminded me that I deserved more than indifference. Daniel wanted to kiss her, wanted it so badly his chest ached with the restraint required to stay still. But he'd made a promise to himself, to her, that they'd do this right. That they wouldn't rush into something that needed time and care to build properly. Soon, he said instead, and Victoria understood immediately. Soon, she echoed, a promise and a hope wrapped into one word. The following weeks passed in a strange suspended state. The divorce proceedings continued their bureaucratic march toward finality. Thanksgiving approached, bringing with it the logistical nightmare of split family holidays. Emma would spend Thanksgiving morning with Daniel and the afternoon with Sarah's family in Portland. Victoria's kids would be with their father for the actual holiday, but with her for the long weekend afterward. "I've never spent Thanksgiving alone," Victoria admitted during one of their now routine evening phone calls. Emma was asleep, and Daniel was sprawling on his couch in the dark, phone pressed to his ear like a teenager. "Even in the worst years of my marriage, we at least pretended to be a family for the holidays." "You won't be alone," Daniel said. "My brother's hosting a bunch of friends who don't have family plans. It's very casual, very chaotic. You'd be welcome." "I don't want to intrude on your family time." "Victoria, you literally helped my daughter build a replica of the solar system last week using papier-mâché and fishing line. You're not an intrusion. You're family." The word hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than he'd intended. Family. Not quite friends, not quite something more, but definitely family in the way that mattered. "Okay," Victoria said softly. "I'd like that." Thanksgiving at Daniel's brother Marcus's house was exactly as advertised. Chaotic, loud, and full of people who'd cobbled together their own version of family from friends and acquaintances. Marcus, older than Daniel by 3 years and infinitely more extroverted, had built a life around gathering people who needed gathering. Victoria arrived looking uncharacteristically nervous, carrying a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine and a homemade pie that she admitted she'd stayed up until midnight making. "You didn't have to do that," Daniel said, taking the pie and trying not to read too much into the domesticity of the gesture. "I wanted to. I haven't baked in years. It was actually kind of therapeutic, even if the crust is probably terrible." The pie turned out to be perfect, and Victoria fit into the chaotic gathering like she'd always been part of it. She helped in the kitchen, laughed at Marcus's terrible jokes, and engaged in an intense debate with one of the other guests about the future of renewable energy technology. Daniel watched her from across the room, seeing the way she relaxed into the informal atmosphere, the way her laugh became freer and her smiles more genuine as the evening wore on. "She's good for you," Marcus said, appearing at Daniel's elbow with 2 beers. "Haven't seen you this happy since before the divorce." "We're not together," Daniel said automatically. "Right, and I'm the Pope." Marcus handed him a beer. "Little brother, I've known you your entire life. I know what you look like when you're falling in love. And that's the look." Daniel took a long drink instead of answering. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder and wandered off to referee an argument about football teams, leaving Daniel to contemplate the uncomfortable accuracy of his observation. Later, as the party wound down and guests started filtering out into the cold November night, Daniel walked Victoria to her car. The temperature had dropped, their breath forming white clouds in the air. "Thank you for inviting me," Victoria said, unlocking her car but not getting in yet. "I needed this more than I realized. Just being around people who didn't expect me to be CEO Victoria or soon-to-be divorced Victoria. Just Victoria." "You're always just Victoria to me," Daniel said. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume and see the way her eyes reflected the streetlights. "Daniel, His phone rang, Sarah's name flashing across the screen. Daniel grimaced. "I'm sorry. I should take this. She has Emma for the afternoon." "Of course. Go," Daniel answered, turning slightly away for privacy. Sarah's voice was tight with poorly concealed annoyance. "I need to bring Emma back early. Something came up with Jake's family, and we need to leave town tonight." Jake was Sarah's boyfriend, a detail Daniel tried not to think about too much. "How early?" "Like now. I'm about 20 minutes from your place." Daniel checked his watch. It was barely 7 p.m. They'd agreed on a 9 p.m. pickup. "Sarah, we had a plan. I know, and I'm sorry, but this is important. Jake's mother is in the hospital, and we need to drive to Spokane tonight." He wanted to argue, to point out that this was exactly the kind of last-minute change that upset Emma, but the mention of a hospitalized parent cut through his frustration. "Okay, I'll head home now." After he hung up, Victoria was watching him with understanding in her eyes. "Emma?" "Sarah's bringing her back early. Family emergency on her boyfriend's side." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I should go." "Don't apologize. Family comes first, always." Victoria reached out and squeezed his arm gently. Text me later. Let me know Emma's okay. I will. He drove home faster than he should have, making it back to his apartment just as Sarah's car pulled into the parking lot. Emma climbed out looking confused and disappointed, her small overnight bag clutched in one hand. I'm sorry, baby, Sarah was saying as Daniel approached. I know we planned for longer, but Grammy needs us. Emma nodded, her face carefully neutral in the way that meant she was trying very hard not to cry. Daniel scooped her up and she buried her face in his shoulder. Thanks for letting me know, Daniel said to Sarah, keeping his voice neutral. I hope everything's okay with Jake's mom. Sarah looked relieved that he wasn't making this difficult. Thanks. I'll call next week about Christmas plans. She kissed Emma's head quickly. Love you, sweetheart. After she drove away, Daniel carried Emma upstairs. She was too big to be carried, really, her legs dangling almost to his knees. But she was his baby, and sometimes babies needed to be carried. Inside the apartment, he set her down on the couch. You okay, Em? Why does she always do this? Emma's voice was small and hurt. She promises we'll have special time, and then she always has something more important. Daniel's heart broke a little. It's not that you're not important, sweetheart. Sometimes emergencies happen. It's always an emergency with her, or work, or something. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Doesn't she want to spend time with me? Of course she does. Your mom loves you very much. Then why does it feel like she's always leaving? Daniel pulled his daughter close, letting her cry against his chest while he searched for words that would make this better, and came up empty. Because the truth was, Sarah was always leaving, had been leaving, in small ways and large, since before the divorce. And Emma was old enough now to see the pattern, even if she didn't fully understand it. I'm here, he said instead. I'm always here, and that's never going to change. Emma cried herself out eventually, her sobs quieting to hiccups and then to nothing. Daniel made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and they watched a movie curled up together on the couch, Emma's head heavy on his shoulder and her small hand wrapped around his. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Everything okay? He typed back with one hand. Will be. Emma's upset, but we're managing. If you need anything, I'm here. Those 4 words settled something in Daniel's chest. I know. Thank you. A minute later, another text came through. Actually, I have an idea. Free tomorrow afternoon? Should be. Why? Let me surprise you. Both of you. The surprise turned out to be tickets to a children's theater production of a fairy tale adaptation, followed by dinner at a place that served elaborate ice cream sundaes and had a policy of encouraging kids to be as loud as they wanted. Emma's eyes lit up when Victoria explained the plan, her earlier sadness temporarily forgotten in the excitement. At the theater, they sat in a row, Victoria, Lily, Emma, Mason, and Daniel, while elaborate costumes and over-the-top acting played out on stage. The kids were completely absorbed, gasping at plot twists and laughing at pratfalls. Daniel found himself watching Emma's face more than the stage, seeing her joy slowly override the hurt from the previous night. She's resilient, Victoria whispered, leaning close enough that her shoulder pressed against his. Kids are amazing that way. She shouldn't have to be this resilient at 6 years old, Daniel whispered back. No, but since she does, it's good that she has you modeling how to handle disappointment with grace instead of bitterness. After the show, at the ice cream restaurant, the kids constructed sundaes that defied physics and probably several nutritional guidelines. Emma got chocolate sauce on her nose, Mason debated the optimal marshmallow to ice cream ratio, and Lily insisted on trying everyone else's creation to determine the winner. Daniel and Victoria sat at the end of the table, drinking coffee and watching their children with the shared exhaustion and affection of parents everywhere. Thank you for this, Daniel said. You didn't have to. Stop thanking me for wanting to spend time with you, Victoria interrupted gently. Both of you. This is an obligation. This is where I want to be. Where you want to be is in a loud ice cream restaurant watching kids get sugar rushes? Where I want to be is with people who feel like home. She said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, and Daniel felt his carefully maintained restraint crack a little more. The first week of December brought the finalization of Victoria's divorce. She called Daniel from her lawyer's office, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of emotion he couldn't quite identify. It's done, she said. Officially, legally, completely done. How do you feel? Relieved, sad, free, terrified, all of it at once. She was quiet for a moment. Daniel, can I see you tonight after the kids are asleep? His heart stuttered. Yeah, of course. She arrived at his apartment at 10 p.m., and Daniel knew immediately that something had shifted. She moved differently, carried herself with a new kind of certainty that hadn't been there before. I've been waiting, she said without preamble, standing in his kitchen where this had all started months ago. Being patient, doing the right thing, taking time to figure out who I am outside of that marriage. Victoria. And I know who I am now, she continued, taking a step closer. I'm a CEO who's good at her job. I'm a mother who's learning to balance work and family without guilt. I'm a woman who spent too many years settling for less than she deserved. Another step. And I'm someone who's completely, irrationally, wonderfully in love with you. Daniel's breath stopped. Victoria. I know we said we'd wait. I know we agreed to be careful and smart and take things slow, but Daniel, I've spent months being careful and smart, and it hasn't changed how I feel. If anything, waiting has just made me more certain. She was close enough now that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes. So I'm done waiting. Unless you need more time, unless you've changed your mind, unless... He kissed her. Finally, after months of restraint and careful boundaries and wanting so badly it hurt, Daniel closed the distance between them and kissed Victoria Langford like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. She made a small sound of surprise that quickly turned into something else, her arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him back with equal intensity. It was better than he'd imagined, and he'd imagined it plenty. She tasted like coffee and possibility and felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria laughed breathlessly. I was planning a whole speech. Very eloquent, had metaphors and everything. You can give it to me later, Daniel said, pulling her close again. Right now I just want to do this. This is much better than a speech, Victoria agreed and kissed him again. They ended up on his couch, tangled together like teenagers, talking between kisses about all the things they'd been holding back for months. Victoria traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips and told him about the moment she'd first realized her feelings had shifted from friendship to something more. Daniel played with her hair and admitted he'd fallen for her the night she'd shown up at his door, broken and brave and trusting him with her truth. I was terrified you'd think I was crazy, Victoria said. This powerful CEO losing it and barging into your apartment after midnight. I thought you were human. Finally, actually human instead of the polished version everyone else got to see. You've always seen me as human. That's why I fell for you. I fell for you because you're brilliant and strong and vulnerable and real, and because you make the best terrible dad jokes I've ever heard. Victoria laughed, the sound warm and free. They're not terrible, they're sophisticated humor. They're terrible and you know it. Fine, but you love them anyway. I do, Daniel said, his voice going softer. I love a lot of things about you. Victoria went still, her eyes searching his face. Daniel, I'm in love with you, he said clearly, wanting there to be no doubt. Have been for months, probably since that first night if I'm being honest. I was just too scared to admit it. I'm in love with you too, Victoria whispered, like it was a secret she'd been keeping even from herself. So much that it terrifies me. We'll be terrified together. They stayed on that couch until nearly 2 a.m, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that finally felt possible. When Victoria reluctantly said she needed to go home, her sitter had school in the morning and needed sleep, Daniel walked her to the door with his hand in hers. Tomorrow? Victoria asked, stealing one more kiss. Tomorrow, Daniel confirmed, and the day after that, and the day after that. I'm going to hold you to that. After she left, Daniel stood in his quiet apartment and let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. He was in a relationship with Victoria Langford. They were together, officially, actually together. It felt surreal and perfect and slightly terrifying all at once. His phone buzzed. Victoria's name on the screen, attached to a photo of her smiling in her car, her lipstick slightly smudged from kissing. Made it home safely, still smiling, still in love with you. Well, Daniel sent back a selfie of his own ridiculous grin. Same. All of the above. See you tomorrow, Daniel Carter. See you tomorrow, Victoria Langford. He went to bed that night happier than he could remember being in years, already counting the hours until tomorrow. Tomorrow came with the kind of bright winter morning that made Seattle look like something from a postcard, the sky clear and blue for once, frost sparkling on car windshields. Daniel woke up smiling before he remembered why. Then the memory of last night crashed over him like a wave and he was grinning like an idiot at his ceiling. He checked his phone. 3 messages from Victoria, sent over the course of the morning while he'd been sleeping in for the first time in weeks. Good morning. Couldn't sleep past 6 because apparently I'm a teenager again. The kids asked why I'm so happy. I told them I had a really good conversation with a friend. Lily gave me a look that suggested she knows exactly which friend. Coffee at my place? I'm making breakfast and trying not to burn it. Daniel sent back, be there in an hour. Fair warning, Emma will want to come. Bring her. Mason's already asking if she can come over anyway. An hour later, Daniel and Emma were sitting at Victoria's kitchen table while she flipped pancakes with the careful concentration of someone who didn't cook often but was determined to get it right. Mason was explaining the finer points of black holes to Emma, who listened with the solemn attention she gave to all his scientific lectures, even when she clearly didn't understand half the words. Lily appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and announced, Mom's happy because she has a boyfriend now. Victoria nearly dropped the spatula. Lily! What? You do, don't you? Lily looked between her mother and Daniel with the satisfaction of someone who'd solved a particularly tricky puzzle. I heard you on the phone last night telling Grandma that you and Daniel were together now. Daniel caught Victoria's eye across the kitchen, fighting back a laugh at her mortified expression. So much for breaking it to them gently, he said. Are you guys dating? Emma asked, looking up from Mason's black hole explanation with wide eyes. Victoria set down the spatula and came to sit at the table, her cheeks slightly flushed. Yes, we are. Daniel and we care about each other very much. And we wanted to tell you all together in a better way than this, but apparently Lily has excellent detective skills. I knew it, Lily said triumphantly. Mason, you owe me $5. You bet on this? Victoria asked. Mason said it would take until Christmas for you guys to figure it out. I said it would happen before then. I win. Lily held out her hand expectantly, while her brother grumbled and pulled a crumpled $5 bill from his pocket. Emma was quiet, her expression thoughtful. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. What do you think, Em? Is this okay? She looked at Victoria, then at him, then at Victoria again. Does this mean we can all be together more? Like, official together? If that's something everyone wants, Victoria said gently. This doesn't change how much your dad loves you, Emma. It just means our families are going to be spending more time together. Can I still call you Victoria? Or do I have to call you something else? You can call me whatever feels right to you. Emma considered this seriously. Okay, I'll stick with Victoria. Then, with the devastating directness of children. Do you love my dad? The kitchen went quiet. Daniel felt his heart hammering, aware that all 3 kids were now watching Victoria with varying degrees of curiosity and intensity. Victoria met Emma's eyes and said simply, Yes, I do. Good, Emma said, satisfied, because he's the best dad ever, and he deserves someone who loves him. Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. Victoria reached across the table and squeezed his hand, her eyes bright. He really is the best, Victoria agreed. I'm very lucky. We're all lucky, Lily declared, clearly pleased with this turn of events. Now can we eat? I'm starving, and those pancakes smell amazing. The tension broke and breakfast proceeded with the comfortable chaos that had become familiar over the past months. But now there was something different underneath it, something more solid and certain. They weren't just 2 single parents helping each other through difficult transitions anymore. They were building something new together, with all the messy complications and unexpected joy that came with blending lives and families. After breakfast, while the kids played in the backyard, Daniel helped Victoria clean up the kitchen. She was loading the dishwasher when he came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to her temple. That went better than expected, he said. Lily's been interrogating me for weeks. I should have known she'd figured it out. Victoria leaned back against him. Are you okay with this? With the kids knowing? Are you kidding? This is the best possible outcome. No awkward announcement necessary, no worried faces, just acceptance. Emma seemed okay with it. Emma's been rooting for us since before we knew there was an us to root for. Daniel turned Victoria in his arms so he could see her face. She told me weeks ago that I smile different when you're around. Smart kid. She gets it from her dad, Daniel said, and Victoria laughed. Your humility is very attractive. I'm full of attractive qualities. Humility, average tech repair skills, the ability to make exactly one decent pasta dish. Victoria kissed him, cutting off his self-deprecating list. Stop. You're amazing, and I won't let you pretend otherwise. Fine, Daniel conceded, but only because you're very persuasive. They stood like that in her kitchen, wrapped up in each other, while outside the kids' laughter rang through the cold December air. It was the kind of moment Daniel had stopped believing in after his divorce, the kind that felt too simple and perfect to be real. I need to tell my parents, Victoria said eventually. They're going to have opinions. Bad opinions? Complicated opinions. They'll want to meet you properly, not just the brief introduction at Emma's soccer game last month. They'll want to make sure you're not some rebound relationship or someone taking advantage of me during a vulnerable time. She grimaced. My father is very protective and very traditional. The fact that you're younger and not from the same social circle is going to raise questions. Daniel had been trying not to think too hard about the practical complications of dating someone from Victoria's world. How much younger? 8 years. You're 32. I'm 40. She said it matter-of-factly, but Daniel could hear the slight defensiveness underneath. Does it bother you? No. Does it bother you? Not even a little bit. Daniel kissed her forehead. Though I reserve the right to make jokes about your superior wisdom and life experience. And I reserve the right to mock your youth and energy, Victoria shot back, smiling. They told Victoria's parents the following weekend. Catherine and Robert Langford lived in a beautiful craftsman-style home in an older, prestigious neighborhood, the kind of place where the houses had names and the gardens were maintained by professionals. Daniel felt distinctly out of his depth pulling up to their circular driveway in his 10-year-old sedan. Stop spiraling, Victoria said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. They're going to love you. You don't know that. I know my parents, and I know they want me to be happy. You make me happy. Therefore, they'll love you. She paused. Eventually, after the interrogation. That's not reassuring. Victoria's mother answered the door with a warm smile that looked exactly like Victoria's. Sweetheart, come in, and you must be Daniel. We've heard so much about you. The house was exactly what Daniel had expected, tastefully decorated, full of family photos and expensive art, with that particular smell of old money and careful maintenance. Robert Langford appeared from what looked like a home office, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes that immediately assessed Daniel from head to toe. Mr. Langford, Daniel said, extending his hand. Thank you for having me. Robert's handshake was firm, his expression neutral. Daniel, Victoria tells us you've been a good friend to her during this difficult time. Dad, Victoria said with a warning tone. What? I'm just stating facts. But there was a slight smile playing at the corner of Robert's mouth. They settled in the living room with coffee and cookies that Catherine had clearly made herself, despite having the means to buy whatever she wanted. The conversation started carefully, with polite questions about Daniel's work and Emma and how he'd ended up in Seattle. Then Robert leaned back in his chair and said, So you're dating my daughter? Dad, Victoria said again, more forcefully this time. It's okay, Daniel said, meeting Robert's eyes directly. Yes, sir, I am. And what exactly are your intentions? Robert, this isn't the 1950s, Catherine interjected. You can't interrogate the poor man like he's asking for her hand in marriage. I'm just trying to understand the situation. Victoria's been through a difficult divorce. She has 2 children. She runs a major company. Her life is complicated enough without what, Dad? Victoria's voice had gone cold. Without someone who actually cares about me? Without someone who sees me as a person instead of a portfolio or a social connection? The room went silent. Daniel could see the hurt flash across Robert's face, quickly masked by defensiveness. That's not what I meant, Robert said stiffly. Isn't it? Victoria set down her coffee cup with slightly too much force. You and Mom have been wonderful through the divorce, supportive and kind and everything I needed. But now that I'm actually moving forward, actually building something new with someone I care about, suddenly there are concerns about age differences and social circles, and whether Daniel's intentions are pure enough. Victoria, sweetheart, Catherine said gently, your father's just worried. We both are. We watched you struggle through a marriage that made you miserable. We don't want to see you hurt again. Then trust me to know what I'm doing. Trust that I've learned from my mistakes. Trust that I wouldn't be with Daniel if I didn't believe in this completely. Victoria reached over and took Daniel's hand, her fingers intertwining with his. He's the best thing that's happened to me in years. The kids adore him. I'm happier than I've been in a decade. That should be enough. Robert looked at their joined hands, his expression softening slightly. I apologize, Daniel. I'm being rude. It's just difficult to watch your daughter go through pain and not become overprotective. I understand, sir, Daniel said carefully. If Emma grows up and starts dating someone, I'll probably be worse. But I can promise you that my intentions toward Victoria are entirely honorable. I love her. I love her kids. And I'm not going anywhere. The declaration hung in the air. Victoria squeezed his hand tightly, her eyes suspiciously bright. Catherine smiled. Well then, that's settled. Robert, stop glowering and be welcoming. Daniel, tell me about Emma. Victoria says she's a wonderful little girl. The rest of the visit went more smoothly. Catherine was genuinely warm and interested, asking about Emma's interests and Daniel's family and their plans for the holidays. Robert thawed gradually, even cracking a smile when Daniel told the story of Mason's exploding volcano and the subsequent purple smoothie disaster. As they were leaving, Catherine pulled Daniel aside while Victoria was saying goodbye to her father. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For making my daughter smile like that again. For seeing her for who she really is instead of who everyone expects her to be. Catherine's eyes were knowing and kind. Don't let Robert intimidate you. His bark is much worse than his bite, and he already likes you more than he's willing to admit. How can you tell? He called you by your first name instead of young man. That's practically a declaration of acceptance in Robert Langford terms. She patted his arm. You're good for her. Don't doubt that. In the car on the way home, Victoria was quiet. Daniel glanced over at her profile, trying to read her expression in the glow of passing streetlights. You okay? He asked. I told them I loved you, Victoria said. In front of them. I just said it out loud like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Was that bad? No. It was terrifying and liberating, and I can't believe I did it, but no, it wasn't bad. She turned to look at him. I meant it, you know, every word. I know, I meant it too. Even after meeting my intimidating father? Especially after meeting your intimidating father. If I can handle Robert Langford's interrogation, I can handle anything. Victoria laughed, the tension finally breaking. You did handle him remarkably well. Most people are thoroughly cowed by his corporate executive stare. I faced down angry clients who blamed me for their own tech incompetence. Your dad's got nothing on a middle manager who deleted their own files and insists it's my fault. Christmas approached with the kind of logistical complexity that came with blended families and split custody arrangements. Emma would spend Christmas Eve with Daniel and Christmas Day with Sarah's family. Victoria's kids would be with their father for Christmas Eve and morning, then with Victoria for the afternoon and evening. It meant coordinating schedules and managing expectations and trying to make sure nobody felt shortchanged. We should do something on the 23rd, Victoria suggested during one of their evening phone calls. All of us together, our own pre-Christmas celebration. What did you have in mind? I don't know. Something fun and ridiculous and completely over the top. Something the kids will remember. They settled on a plan that involved ice skating at the outdoor rink downtown, followed by hot chocolate and a viewing of the massive Christmas tree at the city center, then back to Victoria's house for homemade pizza and a movie marathon. When Daniel told Emma about it, she literally jumped up and down with excitement. The 23rd arrived cold and clear, perfect weather for ice skating if you didn't mind frozen fingers and pink cheeks. Daniel hadn't been ice skating since he was a teenager, and his skills were rusty at best. Victoria was surprisingly graceful, gliding around the rink with the easy confidence of someone who'd taken lessons as a child. Emma clung to Daniel's hand at first, wobbly and uncertain on her skates. But Lily swooped in and declared herself Emma's personal skating instructor, and within 20 minutes, Emma was giggling and attempting small glides on her own. Mason skated with the methodical precision he brought to everything, analyzing the physics of balance and momentum while actually putting it into practice. Daniel watched him explain the science of ice skating to another kid on the rink and smiled at the familiar intensity. "He's going to be terrifying when he's a teenager," Daniel said to Victoria as they made a slow lap around the rink together. All that intelligence focused on whatever teenagers focus their intelligence on. "I know. I'm already bracing myself for the advanced debates about curfews and the meaning of responsible behavior." Victoria stumbled slightly, and Daniel caught her elbow, steadying her. "Thanks. Apparently I'm not as graceful as I thought." "You're doing better than me. I've nearly fallen 4 times. I'm counting. It's actually been 6 times. Show off." Victoria laughed and deliberately skated closer, taking his hand. They glided together around the rink, watching their kids play and race and help each other up when someone fell. The Christmas lights strung around the rink reflected off the ice, creating a magical atmosphere that felt almost too perfect to be real. "This is nice," Victoria said softly. "All of us together like this." "It is," Daniel agreed. "Feels like what?" "Like family." Victoria's hand tightened around his. "Yeah, it does." After skating, they piled into Victoria's SUV. She'd upgraded from her sedan specifically to accommodate more kids and drove to see the Christmas tree. It was enormous and spectacular, covered in thousands of lights and ornaments, with a star on top that seemed to scrape the sky. The kids stood in front of it with their mouths open, craning their necks back to see the top. "Make a wish," Lily said seriously. "Emma, you have to make a wish or it doesn't count." "What should I wish for?" Emma asked. "Whatever you want most in the whole world." Emma thought about it seriously, her face scrunched in concentration. Then she closed her eyes and whispered something too quiet for anyone but herself to hear. When she opened them again, she was smiling. Back at Victoria's house, they made pizza from scratch, with the kids arguing cheerfully about toppings and creating increasingly elaborate combinations. Mason insisted on a scientist's pizza with precisely measured ingredients. Lily wanted heart-shaped pepperoni. Emma declared that more cheese was always the answer to any pizza-related question. They ended up with 4 pizzas of varying quality and questionable topping combinations. But everyone agreed they were delicious because they'd made them together. After dinner, they settled in the living room for movies. Victoria had pulled out every blanket and pillow in the house, creating a massive nest on the floor where all 3 kids sprawled in comfortable chaos. Daniel and Victoria sat on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Halfway through the second movie, Mason fell asleep sitting up. Lily followed soon after, her head on Emma's shoulder. Emma fought sleep valiantly, but eventually succumbed, curled up like a cat among the blankets. "We should probably get them to bed," Victoria whispered. "Probably," Daniel agreed, but neither of them moved. They sat in the quiet living room with the TV playing softly and their children sleeping peacefully nearby, and Daniel felt a contentment so profound it was almost overwhelming. This was what he'd been missing all these years without knowing it. Not just romantic love, but this sense of completeness, a family built not by obligation but by choice and care and genuine affection. "I could get used to this," Victoria said, echoing his thoughts. "Me too." "Daniel?" She shifted slightly to look up at him. "I know it's early. I know we've only been officially together for a few weeks, but I need you to know something." "Okay. This isn't temporary for me. What we're building here, with the kids, with each other, I want this to be permanent. I want us to be permanent." Daniel's heart expanded in his chest. "So do I. I'm not saying we need to rush into anything. We can take our time, do this right. But I need you to know that when I think about my future, you're in it, completely and absolutely." "Victoria." He cupped her face gently, looking into her eyes with all the honesty he possessed. "I want to build a life with you, a real life. I want Sunday morning pancakes and school pickups and arguing about who forgot to buy milk. I want holidays like this and quiet Tuesday nights and everything in between. I want all of it with you." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through tears. "We're really doing this," she said wonderfully, "building a whole life together. We really are." They carried sleeping children to bedrooms, Emma to the guest room that was slowly becoming her unofficial space at Victoria's house, Mason and Lily to their own rooms. Daniel and Victoria moved through the nighttime routine with practiced coordination, tucking in kids and turning on nightlights and making sure everyone was comfortable. After, they stood in Victoria's kitchen with glasses of wine, too keyed up to sleep despite the late hour. "I have something for you," Victoria said suddenly. "An early Christmas present. Wait here." She disappeared upstairs and returned carrying a small wrapped box. "I know we said we weren't doing gifts, but I saw this and I couldn't resist." Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a key on a simple key ring. "It's a key to my house," Victoria explained, suddenly nervous. "I know you already have the code for emergencies, but this felt more official. Like you're not just visiting. You're welcome here anytime. Always." Daniel stared at the key, feeling the weight of what it represented. Trust, commitment, a future where he belonged in this space, not as a guest, but as part of the family. "I love it," he said, his voice rough. "I love you." "I love you too." Victoria smiled. "And before you protest that you don't have a gift for me, you should know that you've already given me the best gift I could ask for." "What's that?" "Hope. For a future I actually want to live in instead of just endure." She set down her wine glass and wrapped her arms around him. "You gave me my life back, Daniel. Everything else is just details." They stood in her kitchen holding each other while outside snow began to fall, the first real snow of the season. Through the window, Seattle transformed into something magical and new, blanketed in white. Daniel thought about that midnight knock months ago, when Victoria had appeared at his door broken and desperate. He thought about all the moments since then, the conversations, the complications, the slow building of trust and affection and love. He thought about Emma sleeping upstairs in a house that was starting to feel like a second home, about Lily and Mason becoming as familiar to him as his own daughter, about Victoria in his arms, solid and real, and choosing him every day. "Merry Christmas," Victoria whispered against his chest. "Merry Christmas," Daniel echoed, and meant it with his entire heart. The new year arrived with the quiet certainty of something inevitable and right. Daniel spent New Year's Eve at Victoria's house with all three kids, watching the ball drop on television while Mason explained the physics of time zones, and Lily insisted on making elaborate resolutions that included teaching Emma a new dance routine every month. "What's your resolution, Dad?" Emma asked as midnight approached. Daniel looked at Victoria across the room, caught her eye, and smiled. "To keep building the life we've started. To be present for the people I love." "That's a good one," Emma said seriously. "Mine is to learn all the constellations so I can teach Mason something for once." Mason looked delighted. "I can help you. I have star charts in my room." As the countdown began and the kids shouted numbers with increasing enthusiasm, Victoria came to stand beside Daniel. When midnight struck and the television erupted in celebration, she kissed him softly while their children cheered and threw confetti they'd made from construction paper. "Happy New Year," she whispered against his lips. "Happy New Year," he said back, and knew with absolute certainty that this year would change everything. January brought a new rhythm to their lives. Daniel started spending more nights at Victoria's house than his own apartment, keeping a drawer of clothes in her bedroom and a toothbrush in her bathroom. Emma had sleepovers with Lily at least twice a week, the two girls becoming so close they finished each other's sentences. Mason appointed himself Daniel's assistant on tech repair jobs, showing up with a notebook full of questions about circuit boards and software architecture. Victoria's company launched its new product line to significant acclaim, which meant longer hours and more stress, but now Daniel was there to pick up the slack. He'd handle dinner on nights when Victoria had late meetings, help with homework when she was on conference calls, make sure the kids got to bed on time when she was traveling for work. "I don't know how to thank you," Victoria said one evening after a particularly grueling week. She'd come home to find Daniel had not only fed all three kids, but had also helped Lily practice her dance recital routine, supervised Mason's science project, and gotten Emma through her reading homework. "You don't thank family for being family," Daniel said simply. "This is what we do." The word hung between them, family. They'd been dancing around it for months, using it casually but never quite claiming it officially. Victoria set down her briefcase and came to wrap her arms around Daniel's waist. "Is that what we are?" she asked quietly. "A family? Aren't we? I want us to be. Officially. Permanently." She looked up at him, her expression vulnerable in a way that still took his breath away. "Daniel, I want to marry you." His heart stopped, then started again at double speed. "Are you proposing to me?" "I'm testing the waters, seeing how you'd react to the idea of making this permanent in every possible way." She was smiling, but he could see the nervousness underneath. "Is it too soon? We've only been officially together for 2 months." "We've been building toward this for almost a year," Daniel countered. "Since that first night you showed up at my door. Maybe even before that. In all those brief conversations at your office when I was just the tech repair guy and you were the intimidating CEO. I was never intimidating to you. You were terrifying. You still are sometimes, but also perfect and amazing, and yes, I want to marry you." Victoria's face transformed with joy. "Really? Really? Though I should probably be the one doing the proposing, traditionally speaking." "Since when do we do anything traditionally?" Daniel laughed and kissed her thoroughly. "Fair point. So is this official? Are we engaged?" "Not yet. I want to do this right." Victoria pulled back slightly, her eyes bright. "I want you to propose when you're ready, when it feels like the right moment. I just needed to know you'd say yes when the time came." "I'll say yes," Daniel promised. "Whenever, wherever, however you want. The answer is yes." They told the kids the next morning over Saturday breakfast. The reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "Does this mean we'll all live together?" Lily asked, bouncing in her seat. "Eventually, yes," Victoria said. "We'll need to figure out the details, but that's the plan." "Can I have my own room?" Emma asked. "I love sharing with Lily, but sometimes I want quiet time." "Everyone gets their own room," Daniel assured her. "We'll figure it out." Mason was quiet, his expression thoughtful. When Victoria asked if he was okay, he looked up with serious eyes. "Will you be our stepdad? Officially?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Daniel understood what Mason was really asking. Would this be real? Would Daniel actually commit to being their parent, not just their mother's boyfriend? "If that's okay with you," Daniel said carefully. "I know I'm not your biological father. I'm not trying to replace him. But yes, if you're comfortable with it, I'd be honored to be your stepdad." "What should we call you?" Lily chimed in. "Whatever feels right. Daniel works fine, or Dad if you want. I'm not picky." "I think Daniel Dad," Emma suggested, "like both names together so we remember you're extra special." Victoria laughed, wiping at her eyes. "Daniel, Dad it is." The proposal came in March, during the first real spring weekend when Seattle remembered that sunshine existed. Daniel had been planning it for weeks with the help of Victoria's mother, Catherine, who'd proven to be a surprising ally. "She deserves something romantic," Catherine had said when Daniel enlisted her help. "Not flashy or expensive, but meaningful. Something that shows you understand who she really is." They'd settled on a plan that involved the kids, both families, and the place where it had all started. Daniel spent days preparing, coordinating schedules, making sure every detail was exactly right. On Saturday afternoon, he told Victoria they were going on a family outing. Nothing special, just a walk around the neighborhood with the kids. She'd agreed easily, suspecting nothing. They walked to a small park near Daniel's apartment, the one where he and Emma used to go when she was younger. The cherry trees were in bloom, petals drifting down like pink snow. As they rounded the corner toward the playground, Victoria stopped short. The park was full of people, Catherine and Robert, Daniel's brother Marcus and his family, a handful of close friends from both their lives. Someone had set up lights in the trees even though it was still afternoon, creating a magical atmosphere. Emma, Lily, and Mason ran ahead, giggling with barely contained excitement. "Daniel!" Victoria turned to him, her eyes wide. "What is this?" He took her hands, his heart hammering. "This is me doing something I should have done months ago. Victoria Langford, you walked into my life when both of us were at our lowest. You were running from a life that was suffocating you. I was stuck in a routine that felt safe but small, and somehow, impossibly, we found each other." Victoria's eyes were already glistening with tears. You've taught me that taking risks can lead to something beautiful, Daniel continued. That family isn't just about biology or obligation, but about showing up and choosing each other every single day. You've made me braver, happier, more alive than I ever thought possible. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a simple ring he'd chosen with Catherine's help, elegant and understated, exactly Victoria's style. The kids crowded closer, barely able to contain their excitement. I know we've already talked about this. I know you basically proposed to me first, which is very you and I love it, but I wanted to make it official. Victoria, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being your partner, your friend, your person who shows up no matter what? Yes, Victoria said immediately, her voice breaking. Yes, absolutely yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss while their families erupted in cheers. The kids rushed forward, wrapping around their legs in a tangle of excitement and joy. We're really getting married? Lily asked, jumping up and down. We really are, Victoria confirmed, laughing through happy tears. When? Mason wanted to know. What's the timeline? Soon, Daniel said. We don't want to wait too long. They set the date for July, wanting something simple and meaningful rather than a large corporate affair. Victoria's board of directors was shocked when she announced she'd be taking a full 2 weeks off for her honeymoon, the first real vacation she'd taken in 5 years. They'll survive without me, she told Daniel. And if they can't, then I've failed as a leader because I haven't built a team that can function independently. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of planning and logistics. They decided to merge households before the wedding, finding a house that was bigger than Victoria's current place but still felt warm and livable rather than ostentatious. It had 5 bedrooms, a backyard with actual grass, and a kitchen large enough for all of them to cook together without constantly bumping into each other. Emma got her own room, painted in her favorite shade of purple, with stars on the ceiling that Mason had helped her arrange in accurate constellation patterns. Lily's room had a wall-length mirror for practicing dance routines. Mason's had built-in bookshelves that he immediately filled with science texts and astronomy guides. Daniel and Victoria's room had windows overlooking the backyard, and a reading nook where they'd collapse at the end of long days, talking about work and kids, and the 1,000 small details of their lives. Moving day was chaos incarnate. Daniel's apartment contents looked pitiful next to Victoria's professionally packed belongings, but somehow they all fit together. Emma's drawings went up on the new refrigerator. Victoria's grandmother's dining table found a home in their dining room. Daniel's worn but comfortable couch ended up in the basement family room where the kids could jump on it without anyone worrying about damage. It's perfect, Victoria said that first night, standing in their bedroom surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. It's a mess and chaotic, and nothing's where it should be yet, but it's perfect. That's because we're all here together, Daniel said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. The stuff is just stuff. This feeling, this is what makes it home. Sarah complicated things, as Daniel had known she would eventually. She'd been largely absent from Emma's life for months, canceling visits and postponing scheduled calls. But when she heard about the engagement, suddenly she had opinions. I'm concerned about Emma being around Victoria's influence so much, Sarah said during a rare phone call. This is all moving very fast. Emma needs stability. Daniel counted to 10 before responding. Emma has stability. She has a home, a routine, people who love her, and show up for her consistently. What she hasn't had is a mother who keeps her commitments. That's not fair. I've been dealing with a lot. And so has Emma. She's 7 years old and she's learned to expect disappointment from you. Do you know how that feels? Watching our daughter brace herself every time you promise to visit, knowing there's a good chance you'll cancel? The silence on the other end was heavy. Finally, Sarah said quietly, I know I haven't been the mother she deserves. I'm trying to do better. Then do better. Show up. Be consistent. Emma doesn't need grand gestures or expensive gifts. She needs you to actually be present when you say you will be. To Sarah's credit, she did try harder after that conversation. She started keeping her scheduled visits, calling Emma every Wednesday evening without fail, and even attended Emma's end-of-year school performance, despite the drive from Portland. When she met Victoria properly for the first time at that performance, the interaction was awkward but cordial. Take care of her, Sarah said quietly to Victoria while Daniel was getting Emma from her classroom. Emma, I mean. She's a special kid. I know she is, Victoria replied. And I will. I promise. While Victoria's ex-husband was less involved in their lives, which was simultaneously easier and sadder. He saw the kids on his scheduled weekends, called occasionally, but seemed content to exist on the periphery of their lives. Mason and Lily adapted to his emotional distance the way they'd learned to adapt to everything, with resilience and the understanding that some people simply couldn't give more than they had. "Do you think he'll come to the wedding?" Lily asked Victoria one evening while they were addressing invitations. "I don't know, honey. Would you want him to?" Lily considered it seriously. "I think yes. Because even though he's not great at showing up, he's still our dad, and this is important." They sent him an invitation. He RSVP'd. Yes, which surprised everyone. The wedding itself was everything they'd hoped for, simple, meaningful, and focused on the family they were creating together. They got married at a small venue overlooking Puget Sound, with Emma serving as flower girl and Lily and Mason both standing as part of the wedding party. Daniel's brother Marcus was his best man, delivering a speech that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. Catherine and Robert sat in the front row looking proud and emotional. Even Daniel's parents had flown in from Arizona, thrilled to see their son so obviously happy. Victoria walked down the aisle not to traditional wedding music, but to a song Emma had chosen, her hand held by her father on one side and Mason on the other. Lily scattered petals with the serious concentration of someone performing a vitally important task. When Victoria reached the altar, Robert kissed her cheek and whispered something that made her smile through tears. Mason gave Daniel a firm handshake and a solemn nod that spoke volumes about the bond they'd built. The ceremony was short and heartfelt. They'd written their own vows, speaking them with voices that shook with emotion but never wavered in conviction. "I promise to show up," Victoria said, her hands clasped in Daniel's. "Every day, in every way that matters. I promise to choose you and choose us, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of our pasts while creating something entirely new." "I promise to see you," Daniel responded. "Really see you, not just the capable CEO or the perfect mother, but the whole person with doubts and fears and dreams. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word, sharing the work, sharing the joy, sharing the quiet moments and the chaotic ones. I promise to love not just you, but the family we're creating together." When the officiant pronounced them married, their kiss was witnessed by everyone who mattered most. Emma cheered so loud she startled herself. Mason clapped with mathematical precision. Lily declared it the most romantic thing ever, with the authority of an 8-year-old wedding expert. The reception was held in the venue's garden, with long tables under string lights and food from the Thai restaurant where Daniel and Victoria had shared that pivotal evening months ago. The kids ran wild with their cousins, burning off energy while the adults talked and danced and celebrated. Daniel's first dance with Victoria was to a song they'd both loved independently before meeting each other, discovering the connection only months into their relationship. As they swayed together, Victoria rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "This is everything I didn't know I could have." "Me too," Daniel said, holding her close. "Me too." Later, he danced with Emma, lifting her onto his feet so she could stand on his shoes like she had when she was tiny. "You okay, sweetheart? I know today's a big change." Emma looked up at him with those wise eyes that always seemed too old for her face. "It's not a change, Dad. It's just making official what was already true. We've been a family for a while now. Today we just told everyone else." Out of the mouths of children. Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "When did you get so smart?" "I told you already. I've always been smart. You just keep forgetting." He laughed and spun her around, her dress flaring out as she giggled. When the song ended, Victoria was there to claim her own dance with Emma, the two of them moving to a faster song while Emma showed off dance moves Lily had taught her. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued around them, Daniel found himself standing at the edge of the garden, just watching Victoria laugh with her mother, watching Emma and Lily perform an impromptu dance routine, watching Mason explain something to Marcus with animated hand gestures, watching all the pieces of his new life fit together into something beautiful and whole. Marcus appeared beside him, 2 beers in hand. He offered one to Daniel. "You did good, little brother." "I got lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You saw an opportunity for happiness, and you went for it, even though it was complicated and risky and probably terrifying. It was definitely terrifying, Daniel admitted. The best things usually are. Marcus clinked his beer against Daniel's. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, Daniel echoed. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Hawaii. Just the two of them, while the kids stayed with grandparents who were thrilled to have them. Daniel and Victoria spent their days swimming and hiking and eating too much, their nights talking about dreams and plans and the life they were building. I want another baby, Victoria said one evening as they watched the sunset from their hotel balcony. I know that's probably crazy. I'm 40 years old. We already have 3 kids. My company is in a crucial growth phase, but I want to have a baby with you. Daniel's heart expanded so fast he thought it might burst. Are you serious? Completely. I want us to create a life together, literally. A sibling who ties all the kids together, who belongs to both of us from the very beginning. She turned to look at him, vulnerability and hope mingling in her expression. Is that something you'd want? Yes, Daniel said without hesitation. Absolutely yes. They started trying as soon as they got home, not telling anyone yet, keeping it as their private hope. 3 months later, Victoria took a pregnancy test on a random Tuesday morning. When the positive result appeared, she stared at it for a full minute before her hands started shaking. She called Daniel immediately. He was on a repair job across town, but dropped everything and came home to find her sitting on their bathroom floor, tears streaming down her face, the test still clutched in her hand. We're having a baby, she said wonderingly. Daniel, we're having a baby. He pulled her into his arms, both of them crying and laughing and overwhelmed with joy. They told the kids that evening, gathering everyone in the living room with serious faces that immediately made Mason suspicious. What's wrong? He asked. Did someone die? No, nobody died, Victoria said, trying not to laugh. Actually, the opposite. We're having a baby. You're all going to have a new sibling. The reactions varied. Emma screamed with excitement and immediately started planning how she'd be the best big sister ever. Lily wanted to know if it would be a boy or girl and started listing potential names. Mason asked detailed questions about gestation periods and fetal development that made Victoria promise to get him appropriate educational materials. Are you happy? Daniel asked Mason later, when the initial excitement had settled and they were alone in Mason's room, looking at his star charts. Yeah, Mason said thoughtfully. It'll be weird having a baby around. I'm used to being the youngest boy, but also kind of cool. I can teach them about science from the very beginning, shape their intellectual development from infancy. Just remember they'll also need to learn about normal kid stuff, like how to play and have fun. I know how to have fun, Mason protested. I have lots of fun doing experiments and reading about quantum mechanics. You're going to be an amazing big brother, Daniel said, ruffling his hair. And an amazing scientist someday, but maybe let the baby learn to walk before you start teaching them about quantum mechanics. The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Victoria's age and the demands of running a company. She worked until 2 weeks before her due date, conducting board meetings via video call while resting her swollen feet on an ottoman Daniel had insisted on buying. You're supposed to be relaxing, he'd say, finding her answering emails at 11 p.m. I am relaxing. I'm sitting down. I'm drinking water. I'm just also working because my brain doesn't shut off. Victoria. Daniel? But she'd smile and close her laptop, letting him pull her into bed where they'd talk about baby names and nursery colors and whether they were actually ready for this. We have 3 kids already, Victoria would point out. We know what we're doing. But this is different. This one is ours from the beginning. We get to make all the choices together, mess up together, figure it out together. Are you nervous? Terrified, Daniel admitted, and so excited I can barely stand it. Their son was born on a crisp October morning, arriving 2 days after his due date with the same methodical timing Mason approached everything. Daniel was in the delivery room holding Victoria's hand and coaching her through contractions while she threatened to never let him touch her again, and he promised whatever she wanted. When the baby finally arrived, tiny and perfect and screaming his displeasure at the world, Daniel cut the cord with shaking hands and watched the nurses clean him off and wrap him in a blanket. They placed him on Victoria's chest, and she looked down at this new life they'd created with wonder in her eyes. Hello, little one, she whispered. We've been waiting for you." They named him James, after Daniel's grandfather and Victoria's favorite uncle, with the middle name Carter Langford because they couldn't decide which last name and eventually agreed he should have both. The kids met their new brother that afternoon, filing into the hospital room with varying degrees of excitement and trepidation. Emma insisted on washing her hands 3 times before being allowed to touch him. Lily immediately started singing lullabies she'd learned at school. Mason stood back initially, just watching until Victoria invited him closer. "Want to hold him?" she asked. Mason nodded seriously. Daniel showed him how to support the baby's head, and Mason settled into the chair with James in his arms, studying him with the same intensity he brought to his science projects. "He's so small," Mason said quietly. "Hard to believe we were all this tiny once." "You were actually smaller," Victoria said. "You were a preemie. We joke that you were too impatient to wait the full term." "Still impatient," Lily teased, but gently. They sat together in that hospital room, all 6 of them, and Daniel felt the click of everything falling into place. This was his family, the daughter he'd raised alone, the woman he'd fallen impossibly in love with, her 2 brilliant kids who'd accepted him completely, and now this tiny new person who belonged to all of them. "We're really doing this," Victoria said, reading his thoughts. "All of it. The whole chaotic, beautiful, impossible thing." "We really are," Daniel agreed. The first months with James were exhausting in the way only new parents could understand. Daniel and Victoria took turns with night feedings, stumbling through their darkened house at 3 a.m. while James fussed and fed and finally settled back to sleep. The older kids helped where they could. Emma would fetch diapers. Lily would sing to soothe him. Mason would read developmental psychology articles and report his findings on optimal infant stimulation. "You know you don't have to optimize the baby, right?" Daniel told Mason after finding him creating a spreadsheet tracking James's feeding times and sleep patterns. "I'm not optimizing. I'm gathering data to identify patterns. That's different, if you say so." Work got more complicated with a newborn in the house. Victoria had to navigate being CEO while also being a new mother again, this time determined to find better balance than she'd had with Lily and Mason. She'd negotiated to work from home 3 days a week, attending only essential in-person meetings. Daniel juggled his freelance schedule around Victoria's needs, taking on projects during her office days, and being primary parent when she had crucial meetings or travel. Some of his longtime clients grumbled about his reduced availability, but he'd built up enough goodwill and expertise that most accommodated the new schedule. "I never thought I'd be doing this again at 40, Victoria said one evening, rocking a fussy James while simultaneously reviewing a contract on her tablet. "And yet here you are, multitasking like a champion." "I'm not sure this counts as championing anything. I'm pretty sure I just agreed to terms I haven't actually read because James chose that exact moment to spit up on my shoulder." Daniel took the baby and handed her a burp cloth. "Go take a shower. I've got him." "Are you sure? You've been dealing with him all afternoon." "Victoria, shower, now, before I physically carry you to the bathroom." She went, and Daniel walked the floor with James, bouncing gently and humming tunelessly while the baby gradually settled. By the time Victoria emerged, clean and slightly more human-looking, James was asleep on Daniel's shoulder, drooling onto his shirt. "You're a natural," Victoria said softly. "I've had practice, though I'd forgotten how much babies can produce in terms of bodily fluids. Pretty sure I've been spit up on, drooled on, and peed on all in the same day. Welcome to parenthood, again." "Wouldn't trade it for anything," Daniel said, and meant it completely. As James grew from newborn to infant to toddler, their family found its rhythm. Mornings were controlled chaos. Getting 3 kids ready for school while managing a baby was like conducting an orchestra where half the musicians were actively rebelling. But they made it work through teamwork and coffee, and accepting that some days everyone would show up slightly disheveled, and that was fine. Evenings were sacred family time. They'd all gather for dinner, even if it was just takeout eaten straight from containers. Everyone would share their day's highlight and lowlight. Mason would explain whatever scientific concept he'd learned. Lily would demonstrate her latest dance. Emma would read from her creative writing assignments. James would babble nonsense and throw food, which everyone agreed was his way of participating. Weekends involved a rotating schedule of soccer games, dance recitals, science fairs, and toddler music classes. Daniel and Victoria divided and conquered, making sure at least one parent was at every event while the other managed the remaining kids. "We should invest in a cloning machine," Victoria joked after a particularly hectic Saturday where Mason's science fair and Lily's recital had overlapped. "Or just accept that we're doing the best we can," Daniel countered. "The kids know we love them. We show up as much as humanly possible. That has to be enough." It was enough. More than enough, actually. The kids were thriving in their chaotic, blended, slightly unconventional family. Emma had stopped waiting for disappointment and started expecting joy. Lily had grown more confident, performing without the weight of trying to be perfect all the time. Mason had learned that being smart didn't mean you couldn't also be silly, and that teaching your baby brother to make fart noises was as valuable as teaching him about planetary motion. On James's second birthday, they threw a party in their backyard with both families, close friends, and what seemed like half of Emma's school class. The house was full of laughter and noise and the beautiful chaos of people who loved each other gathering to celebrate. Daniel stood at the grill, flipping burgers while Marcus helped and offered unsolicited advice about charcoal distribution. From here he could see the whole scene: Victoria's parents playing with James in the grass, the older kids running wild with their friends, Victoria laughing with Catherine while frosting an elaborate birthday cake. "You've built something good here," Marcus said, following his gaze. "Something real." "We have," Daniel agreed. "Still can't quite believe it sometimes. That all of this came from one midnight knock on my door. Life's funny that way. You think you've got it all figured out, and then someone appears and changes everything. Best change that ever happened to me." Later, after the party wound down and the guests filtered out, after the kids had crashed from sugar highs and been tucked into bed, Daniel and Victoria collapsed onto their back porch with glasses of wine. The yard was a mess of birthday decorations and discarded paper plates, but neither of them had the energy to care. "Another successful birthday," Victoria said, kicking off her shoes. "James seemed to enjoy himself, even if he spent most of the party covered in cake." That's how you know a toddler birthday party is successful. If the birthday boy isn't completely covered in cake, you've done something wrong. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. From inside, they could hear the old house settling, the soft hum of their life continuing even in these quiet moments. "Do you ever miss it?" Daniel asked. "The simplicity of before? When it was just you and your work, before all this chaos?" Victoria turned to look at him, her expression serious. "Never. Not even once. That version of my life was successful and polished and completely hollow. This," she gestured to the messy yard, the house full of sleeping children, the evidence of their chaotic, beautiful life. "This is everything I didn't know I needed." "Me too," Daniel said softly. "I thought I was content before. Thought Emma and I were doing fine on our own. But this is so much more than fine." "We're a good team," Victoria said, taking his hand. "The best team." They sat together as the stars came out, the same stars Mason loved to chart and explain to anyone who'd listen. Daniel thought about that first night, when Victoria had appeared broken and desperate at his door. He thought about all the moments since then, the slow building of trust, the careful navigation of complicated feelings, the gradual weaving of their lives together into something stronger than either could have created alone. He thought about Emma sleeping upstairs in her purple room with the constellation ceiling, about Lily dreaming of dance routines and performances, about Mason with his science books and his gentle heart hidden under all that logic, about James in his crib, this perfect little person who tied them all together. And he thought about Victoria beside him, brilliant and strong and human in his wife, his partner, his person who'd shown up when life was falling apart and helped him build something better than he'd ever imagined possible. "I love you," he said, simple and true. "I love you too," Victoria replied, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for not calling the police that night when a strange CEO broke into your apartment." Daniel laughed. "Thank you for being brave enough to show up, for trusting me with your truth. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Daniel corrected. "The best was saying yes when I proposed." "Debatable. Both were pretty good decisions." They bantered back and forth in the darkness, their voices low and warm with affection and the ease of two people who'd learned each other's rhythms completely. Inside, their children slept peacefully. Around them, their home stood solid and welcoming. Above them, the stars wheeled through the infinite sky, the same stars that had witnessed every moment of their unlikely journey. This was their life now, messy and complicated and full of noise and love and the everyday miracles of showing up for each other. It wasn't perfect. There would still be hard days and difficult moments and challenges they couldn't yet foresee, but they'd face them together, this family they'd chosen and built and nurtured into something extraordinary. And every morning, when Daniel woke up in their shared bedroom, with sunlight streaming through the windows and Victoria's hand in his and the sound of their children stirring throughout the house, he knew he'd found exactly what he'd been searching for all along. A place where he truly belonged. A family that was chosen and real and completely his. A love that had started with an unexpected midnight visitor and grown into the foundation of everything that mattered. This was home. This was family. This was everything. And it was more than enough.